So Julian Assange was spied upon while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. In addition, there were plans discussed by the CIA and other government actors to assassinate him. Lastly, the star witness of the US, who has a documented history of several convictions for sexual abuse of minors and even for committing financial fraud, admitted to fabricating key accusations against Assange. These facts received little to no attention in the German media when the verdict came. It was just presented very objectively. So, in your assessment, why do you think these facts were not given the weight that they deserved in the British court? So, for example, if Navalny was tried in Russia and all of these things were done by the Russian government, we would have seen a big coverage and weightage put on these facts. Why do you think these developments were just simply thrown out by the British court?
It's amazing. I visited Julian Assange in, I believe it was 2018 in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. I visited him as a journalist. I visited him with my husband, David Miranda, who's an elected member of the Brazilian Congress, who's a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and was traveling on a diplomatic Brazilian passport to London. We went there to do an event together about what happened at Heathrow Airport during the Snowden reporting to David, and we went and visited the embassy, and we were among the people who were spied on by this private contractor hired by the CIA, as were many other people. An incredible breach of diplomatic protocols, of press freedom, of privacy. Beyond that, he is suffering greatly inside of that embassy, or inside the prison where he is. His doctors have said that his physical and mental health are deteriorating rapidly, and yet there's very little coverage of it. And what you have instead is the American media, the German media, the British media. They love to accuse other countries of attacking journalists. They love to talk about what Putin has done to Navalny, what China has done to journalists, all of which may be true. But what standing moral credibility does the United States and the UK have to condemn other countries for punishing journalists or attacking press freedoms when the person who I would argue is one of the most consequential journalists of our generation, if not the most consequential, is imprisoned by both of those governments, maltreated in every way imaginable, his basic human rights and political rights violated for years with almost no objection? It's, something that every other country in the world will just laugh at when the US and the UK pretend to be able to denounce other countries for attacks on press freedom. And they should be laughed at because they are among the worst violators.
An organization called Project Veritas was searched by the FBI for their adversarial work on Biden. Assange is now being extradited to the US for his work with WikiLeaks. We are not only seeing governments going after publishers, but we can see the same trend in the corporate sphere. So let's say YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, content is being deleted or removed of independent and alternative media outlets, whether it's critical of Biden or Corona policies, etc. So for example, Activism Munich, we used to grow every year by thousands and thousands and thousands of subscribers. This is the first year, even though we've produced more videos than last year, where we have won 0 subscribers. And something has changed in the algorithms. We don't know what it is. In light of this, as a constitutional lawyer, I would like to ask you what free speech and press freedom actually means. Is it reserved for only institutional press and credentialed journalists, or does the definition go beyond?
So obviously, American law is different than other countries' laws, but in the United States, where press freedom was first protected by a constitution, a lot of people mistakenly believe, or have been purposely misled to believe, that the right of press freedom is available only to this small, professionalized, privileged group of people called journalists. So oftentimes, if you say that the prosecution of Assange is an attack on press freedom, as I said earlier, you'll be met with the objection, well, Julian Assange isn't a journalist, and therefore it can't be a case of press freedoms being attacked. I have no idea how people decide that Julian Assange isn't a journalist, given that, as I said earlier, he's broken more major stories than all of his critics combined. It looks to me like what he does is classic journalism. He gets information in the public interest from a source that's secret and then goes and publishes it so that the public can understand what their governments or other power centers are doing. That, to me, seems to be classic journalism. But ultimately, who does the left trust to decide who is and isn't a journalist? I mean, who decides that? Is it the US government? They get to say that person's a journalist, that one's not. But I don't trust any institution to decide that. But the much more important point is that press freedom, as it was understood at the time that the Constitution was enacted, was never intended to apply only to a small group of privileged people, like some small priesthood of licensed credentialed journalists. It was a right that was available to all citizens. In fact, what it really meant, people who were using the press, the reason it's called the press is they were literally using a printing press, mimeographic machines and the like, that colonists in the United States, like Thomas Paine and others, were printing materials agitating the public to be opposed to the British Crown. And most of them weren't professional journalists. Thomas Paine never worked in a newspaper. He never worked in any media outlet or anything like that. He was just a citizen who had other jobs, but he was using the press to express himself. And that's what freedom of the press means. It's not that there's a certain group of people who are licensed as journalists who get to do something that no one else gets to do. It's the opposite. It's that all citizens have the right to avail themselves of the right to be heard and to inform their fellow citizens using the press. It's something that's available to all citizens. So it doesn't matter whether someone is quote unquote a journalist. But I think you put your finger on something very important, which is, the idea that some people on the right are opposed to basic civil liberties or free speech is not new to me. That's not surprising to me. What's disturbing is how much support there is for people from the left that seem to want to trust Google and Facebook and big tech companies or even the government to police and regulate and censor our discourse. And one of the things I'm trying to do more than anything is to make people understand that the power of censorship or the power to punish journalists is not about left or right. It's about anyone who wants to challenge establishments of power or the narratives of orthodoxy and piety that the establishment disseminates, whether on the right or the left. So you mentioned earlier that videos of yours, even the one you did with me, had been taken down by YouTube. All over the world, leftists are being victimized by big tech censorship. The first reporting I ever did on Facebook censorship was in 2016, and it was reporting that I did about how the Israeli government makes lists and gives them to Facebook of Palestinian journalists and activists who they claim are inciting terrorism, by which the Israeli government means criticizing Israel. And in 98 or 99% of the cases, Facebook takes these lists and bans and removes the Facebook pages of those people in Palestine that the Israelis want silenced. That's how censorship works. It's a majoritarian tool that is always going to be used against the marginalized. Now, sometimes the marginalized are people who have views that you dislike, fringe right-wing voices. But if you applaud censorship because it's aimed at some right-wing voice that you dislike, the precedent that you're affirming, the system that you're upholding, is one that says that the government has the right to ensure that anyone on the fringes, anyone on the margins, won't be heard from and can be silenced. And the only voices that will be heard are these licensed, credentialed corporate media outlets that do nothing but disseminate and never question, challenge, or undermine establishment pieties. And that's the whole point of that system, which is why it's insanity for anyone who views themselves as being on the left to support it.
These are the building blocks that make up our organization and the goals we would like to achieve. In order to continue our journalism until 2022 and realize these values fundamental to our democracy, we need 1,000 supporters in our crowdfunding campaign, donating only €5 or dollars per month via Patreon or bank account. Right now, we have only 200 supporters and are not able to take the next step. Our future is in your hands. Strengthen independent journalism and be part of meaningful change.